everyone. Apologies, just a few technical things on our end here, but we're sorting them out. Welcome to this panel, Journalism in Pakistan, State Repression and the Politics of Solidarity. My name is Mahvish Ahmad. I'm an assistant professor in human rights and politics here at the London School of Economics, and I'll be your chair this afternoon. Let me begin first and foremost by thanking Maddie Giles, our communications and events officer, who makes all of our events possible here at the Center for Human Rights and the Department for Sociology, and by thanking the co-organizers of this event, a collective of UK-based Pakistani scholars and activists who joined forces to make this event happen. I want to in particular thank Ejaz Khan, a lawyer based here in the UK, Zoha Wasim, Dr. Zoha Wasim, a researcher at University College London, and Muhammad Salman Khan, also Dr. Muhammad Salman Khan at King's College London. So thank you so much for playing such a vital role in making this event happen. Why are we holding this event? So in the past few years, the Pakistani state, in particular its security institutions, have ramped up censorship, harassment, and attacks against journalists intent on reporting truthfully and critically about political events in the country. Their work cannot but include transparent and accurate accounts of the role of Pakistani military and intelligence, a set of institutions that have always played an overpowering role in Pakistani politics. They have done this most famously through 3 separate military coups, which has kept them in power for several years, each time with enormous funding from Western countries, in particular the United States. Today, as we will learn, they continue to exercise their power despite, or some critics say, because of the presence of a civilian government that is refusing to oppose the ongoing influence of security institutions over Pakistani politics. As UK-based Pakistani scholars, our collective has been watching crackdowns in Pakistan with immense concern. A crackdown that has manifested in displacements, harassments, and forced disappearances and extrajudicial killings, and included not just journalists, but scholars, students, and political organizers who are intent on taking part in the political life of the country, often for the purposes of widening and deepening democracy, of making it more available and livable for all Pakistanis. As we see it, this crackdown began in some of Pakistan's most marginalized areas, among the country's most racialized and targeted communities, places like Balochistan, the former tribal areas, and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, where journalists, students, scholars, political organizers have been ruthlessly persecuted for speaking truthfully about political events and the role of security forces in political life. As UK-based Pakistani scholars, we are also embedded in critical political conversations in this country, in the UK, in particular those related to ending the effects of colonization, racism, and empire. By holding this event from a center of human rights at the LSE, which engages deeply with these debates, we are also saying that the priorities of ongoing political struggles across the global South need to be more forcefully centered in our conversations. This is especially true of the important work that journalists do, that writers do, organizers and students in places like Pakistan, a country where colonial era laws of sedition still gets used against dissidents, and a country where US imperial intervention in the region and Western pressures to ramp up a counter-terror infrastructure has ballooned the capacity of the security state to surveil, harass, and attack those who question the reigning order. So this starts in events like today by learning and listening, first and foremost, from all of those courageous and insightful people who do the difficult work of reporting and writing and speaking truthfully. One of the ways that we are making sure that we are listening to people who are doing the difficult work of political organizing in a place like Pakistan is by holding this event as a multilingual event. This event will be held both in English and Urdu. It will mostly be English, but we have Urdu speakers, and as the people we will also switch between Urdu and English as we speak. There will be translation spoken during this event for anything that's said in Urdu into English. But in the future, at the Center for Human Rights, we do hope to introduce more simultaneous translation into our events, and that's our commitment to also decolonizing the university. Let me also just say in Urdu myself, कि जो सब पाकिस्तान में बैठे हुए हैं इस वक्त सुन रहे हैं, ख़ास तौर पे जो सहाफ़ी हमारे सहाफ़ी दोस्त और बरादरी है, अगर ख़ास तौर पे जो ऐसे इलाकों में बैठे हुए जिधर अटैक्स सहाफ़ियों के ख़िलाफ़ सबसे पहले शुरू हुआ था, चाहे वो बलूचिस्तान है, फॉर्मर फाटा है, केपी है, आपको हम ख़ास तौर पे कहते हैं कि आप उर्दू या अंग्रेज़ी या जो भी ज़बान में आप चाहते हैं, आप अपने सवाल ज़रूर पूछें. But let me now move to introduce our fantastic panel. It is my immense honor to introduce our panelists today. Asad Toor, Sanna Ejaz, Matiullah, and Rabia Mahmood, 4 reporters, organizers, and thinkers who are as exemplary in the courage that they exhibit as the insights that they provide. Asad Toor is an Islamabad-based journalist who has spent 15 years working in the media industry. He is currently with Aaj TV as a senior producer. He also reports for Toor, a digital platform, and vlogs at his YouTube channel, Asad Toor Uncensored, to fight censorship in Pakistan. In September 2020, authorities charged Toor with sedition for comments made on social media maligning state institutions. The charges were dismissed by a court. On May 25th, 2021, he was attacked by 3 civilian clothes men who identified themselves as members of Pakistan security services. In many ways, we're holding this event because of what has happened to Asad in the past few weeks. He will begin our talk today. The second speaker will be Sanna Ejaz, who is a journalist and human rights activist from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Pakistan's northernmost province. Ejaz worked as a TV anchor at Pakistan television for 2.5 years after being removed for her support and activism in the Pashtun Tahaffuz movement, one of Pakistan's largest anti-violence, anti-militarist movements in the country, coverage of which is regularly censored on local media channels. She is one of the most important female leaders of the PTM, the Pashtun Tahaffuz movement. She's a chairperson of the WAC movement, which focuses especially on gender empowerment, and a believer of nonviolent political action. Matiullah, our third speaker, is an Islamabad-based journalist, social media and communications trainer, and a media law expert. In 2020, he was abducted and tortured in the Pakistani capital, Islamabad. In 2018, Jan's TV show was shut down and he was removed from the channel he was associated with. He's also facing contempt of court charges for criticizing senior judges for their decision against a fellow Supreme Court judge. Jan is currently running a personal YouTube news channel, MJTV. Finally, and last but not least at all, is Rabia Mahmood. Rabia Mahmood is an independent journalist and researcher based in Lahore, Pakistan. She's currently a regular contributor to the online digital media platform, Toor. She has extensive decades-long research in human rights, minority rights, but especially and including and relevant for our panel, censorship, digital rights, press and media, and freedom of speech in a Pakistani context. She was earlier with Amnesty International South Asia, Jinnah Institute, a fellow at MIT, and a million other things. So I want to stop talking now and hand over the mic to Asad Toor, but before I do, one final housekeeping point. Each of the speakers will speak for 10 minutes, and then we'll open up for questions. We invite all of you listening, especially those who are journalists in Pakistan, as I said earlier, to please ask questions. You can do this in several different ways. If you're watching through the live stream on Facebook, write your questions in the chat there. You can also tweet with the handle LSE Sociology. We'll make sure to pick up your questions, or you can email sociology.media@lse.ac.uk. The details will be shared on Facebook as well, and various other, wherever you're watching from. So that's enough for me. Asad, the floor is yours. Asad, I think you need to unmute. Oh, there we go. Perfect.
Can you listen to me now? Yes. Thank you, Department of Sociology of London School of Economics, Dr. Zoha Wasim, Dr. Muhammad Salman, Ma'am Aisha Ejaz Khan, and Ma'am Mahvish Ahmad for inviting me to share panel with my seniors and fellows, Sanna, Ejaz, Rabia, Mahmood, and my mentor, Matiullah Jan. On a lighter side, I also want to say whatever happened to me and why I got attacked, Matiullah Jan is also responsible for this, because Mati Bhai is the one who taught me, groomed me to speak the truth to the powerful without any fear. I'm really grateful to Mati Bhai for making me whatever I am today. He's my inspiration, and I also admire Nusrat Javed Sahab, Muhammad Hanif Bhai, Cyril Maida Bhai, Abbas Nasir Sahab, and I wish I ever get a chance to work with them. I also learned a lot from Mubashir Zadi, Hamid Mir, Kashif Abbasi, Saeed Wajahat Ali, Abdul Shakur Khan, Ambar Shamsi, Sana Bucha, Asma Shazi, and Sana Gulzar in my career. I want to thank all of them for always staying by me and helping me to reach this stage. I also want to thank you, Pakistan Bar Council's Journalist Defense Committee members, Iman Mizari, Usman Wadaich, Haider Imtiaz, and many other excellent lawyers for protecting me, and many other fine journalists from state oppression in Pakistan. Now I want to come to the topic. Everybody, you know the incident that I was thrashed by three men at my apartment. But I want to tell, this is not the first time I become part of such controversy, or you can say a part of such harassment. In 2018, before that general elections in Pakistan, officers of intelligence agency visited my parents in my hometown. Then they summoned them at their office and harassed them and conveyed them this player that I am the critic of the then involvement in elections by the state, the manipulation, and later I was shown the door from a channel where I was working as in charge of an election cell. And then later on, as you already told, there was an FIR in Rawalpindi last year registered against me. They also had the similar charges that I propagate against Pakistan Army and state of Pakistan on social media. Interestingly, they never produced that material which they want to show that in that material I'm propagating against any state institution. And later, after 4 months, by dragging me in 5 different courts of Pakistan, the charges were dropped. The FIR was disposed of by the High Court of Lahore by saying that there was no charges found. Interestingly, when the FIA summoned me for the questioning and I asked them, what is the material against me? They said, we are not here to show you the material, just answer us. I said, if I cannot see the material, how can I answer you? They said, okay, just respond that do you propagate against army and Pakistan? I said, no, I am a journalist, I just report. They said, okay, fine. And then they submitted a report in the court by saying, no charges, no evidence found against me. But my question is, if there was no evidence, produced before the police or FIA, then how an FIR get registered against me? This is my question. I still get no answer. And again, a few weeks back, on 25th May, I recently, before Eid, I got very clear threats that I will get fixed after Eid because of my reporting on the government, on the military generals, and on the other land mafia whom I allege that had collaborated with this current sitting regime. And I was getting very clear messages that stop reporting on this or change your topic on health and education. I said, I don't have any expertise in health and education. How can I report on this? And even later on this 25th May, 3 armed men forced into my apartment. They beaten me. They questioned me that you are getting foreign funding, how many foreign funding you are getting from whom, and they beat me very brutally with the butts of their pistols on my elbows, and then they made my videos, forced me to chant patriotic slogans. And I was just thinking that why I need to prove my patriotism to them. And they were making my videos on their cell phones. They were getting calls. They were so doing this all with great impunity, like they had no fear of getting caught. And when they get in, they introduce themselves. They introduce themselves that they are men of ISI. And when they left after that, I went to police and I registered this, who beat me. And now, interestingly, some retired generals, some so-called trolls and YouTubers propagating against me that I am maligning state institutions. I'm just asking questions. This is not I am maligning. This is what they introduce themselves, that they are men of ISI. You have to find them. You have to get them caught and question them that why they introduce it. If they are not from security agencies, then why they introduce themselves as a men of ISI. So, but they are maligning me. They are harassing me. I again getting the same threats now. This time we will throw you behind bars if you are not going to retract from your statement. And they're telling me that you will stay behind bars for months. You will lose your job, your career, and we will defame you. And my question is that why? Even still, I am wearing this full sleeves shirt. Why I start wearing these full sleeves shirts? Because whenever I see bruises, scars, and these wounds on my arms, it starts coming in my mind that why I get targeted. Why? Just because I report, I cannot forget the hate my attackers have in their eyes for me. The way they were talking to me, they hate me so much. I was just want to ask that why this much hate is injected in the brains of such attackers or our fellow Pakistanis, our citizens who are also our brothers, our sisters. Why they're injected this much hate for us? That because we are dissenting voices, we criticize these policies, we report these facts. Just because of this, they hate us. I mean, they call us traitors just because of this. The generals openly saying that, look, those retired generals, that he's looking for asylum abroad. I'm still here after 3 weeks of the attack. I'm not going anywhere. My brother who lives in a Gulf state is asking me from last 3 weeks that give me your passport. I want you to come here and take a break. But I'm not going. I first want this case get solved. But instead of case solving, yet my opposition politicians visited me, but nobody from the government visited me. Instead, they are running a malicious campaign against me. So the government who is running on my taxes is responsible for providing me security. Instead of getting after my attackers, they are trying to harass me. This is something very disturbing for me. And then I also want to highlight here that I was in great shock. Recently, chief of our very powerful security forces held an off-the-record meeting with some senior journalists and anchors. There he told the journalists when they asked him about the attack on Absar Alam that no, we are very sophisticated. We don't go for such attacks in this way. I was in a shock that our chief of our security forces is not denying, but saying that we have the capacity, but we cannot go with this way. But I have an answer. Whenever they go against any journalist or any dissenting voice, this is not sophistication. This is impunity, which encourages them to launch such attacks. Where was the sophistication when they abducted Matiullah Jan in broad daylight from the heart of Islamabad? The men in anti-terrorist squad uniform, the cars with sirens came to abduct Matiullah Jan, and then no safe city camera gave the footage of those abductors. Not Nadra gave the record of the faces came on in this CCTV. Is it sophistication? This is impunity. This is not sophistication. Again, I want to ask here, recently another our fellow journalist, Kamran Yusuf, get abducted and asked questions about one of his news story. Ahmad Nurani got beaten in the same Islamabad. Umar Chima got abducted from the same Islamabad, beaten. Salim Shahzad abducted from Islamabad, murdered brutally. Where are the attackers? I want to ask who shot Absar Alam? I also want to ask, where are the commission reports? Where are the culprits who attacked Hamid Mir, senior journalist in Karachi, shot him 6 times, 2 bullets still in his body? I also want to ask, where is our KP murdered journalist Hayatullah Khan and Musa Khan Khel reports? Where are the attackers? I also want to ask, where are the reports on our fellow journalists of Sindh, Aziz Memon, Ajay Lalwani, and Wali Khan Babar? Where are their attackers? Are they punished? Where are the attackers of Balochistan journalists who get murdered? Abdul Wahid Raisani, Shahina Shaheen, Irshad Mustoi, and dozens of others across Pakistan. If there are any sophistication, the evidence is there. In my case, there is evidence. You can find them from geofencing, from fingerprints, from everything, even the turn on my mobile the next day. So why we are getting attacked, and then every time, instead of going after our attackers, the malicious campaigns start against us? There is a citizen woke up one morning and he realized that I propagate on YouTube against the state institutions, and then he registered a complaint in FIA against me. Now, how he come to know? Who is he to decide that I am maligning? I'm just reporting. I launched a YouTube channel named Asad Toor Uncensored just to fight censorship, because our mainstream media is forced to report positive news. So just to find an alternate platform, I launched that YouTube channel by following the steps of my seniors like Matiullah Jan, Sayyid Talat Hussain, and many others. So how can you label a journalist that he's a traitor if he is reporting on you? How can you label him a traitor? Freedom of speech, freedom of press is our right. Article 19 and 19A of Pakistani Constitution guarantees us this right. People sometimes ask us that you are very brave, you are doing jihad, you are reporting on these personalities, these government officials, and they're criticizing their policies. I always tell them that no, we are not doing any jihad. This is our job. We are journalists. If we cannot report, we must leave this field. So I will ask you, I will request at the end of my speech to the panelists, to the people who are listening, that please, and also the powerful people of Pakistan who are retaining important positions, that try to understand our job. Don't hate us. This hate will not benefit this country. This country will never grow out of hate. Kindly listen us. Let us report. Let us do our job. We are Pakistanis. We love this country. We born here. You born here. Respect our right of report. Anyway, thank you. Sorry, I exceed my time. I apologize for taking extra time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Asad, for a powerful speech and much to think about. Sanna ji, I'd like to ask you to join us and share some of your thoughts.
आपको शुरू करना होगा, मेरी वीडियो यहाँ से होगी।
मैं शुरू करती हूँ।
ओके, बहुत शुक्रिया, थैंक यू सो मच। लंदन स्कूल ऑफ इकोनॉमिक्स सोशियोलॉजी डिपार्टमेंट, महविश, डॉक्टर सलमान, डॉक्टर जोहा, आयशा, thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be on the panel with such brave and such committed people. I would prefer to speak in Urdu because I have a very limited time slot to speak, and hopefully Zoha will summarize all my talk here. Thank you. पाकिस्तान एक सिक्योरिटी रियासत है, और इस सिक्योरिटी रियासत में ऐसा है कि यहाँ सिक्योरिटी इदारों को ऐसा लगता है कि سارے جو ہمارے ہمسائے ممالک ہیں وہ تو ہے دشمن، مگر ملک کے اندر جو لوگ، چاہے وہ صحافی ہیں، انسانی حقوق پر کام کرنے والے لوگ ہیں، یا چاہے وہ پھر سیاسی ورکرز ہیں، وہ سب بھی دشمن ہیں جب وہ آواز اٹھائیں، کسی غلط کو غلط کہیں، سیاہ کو سیاہ کہیں اور سفید کو سفید کہیں، تب وہ ٹارگٹ کیے جاتے ہیں. جیسے کہ اسد تور نے ذکر کیا، دکھ کی بات ہے، خیبر پختونخوا اور فاٹا میں اس پہ نہیں جاؤں گی کیونکہ اسد نے اس پہ بات کر لیا. مکرم خان کو 2012 میں بہت بے دردی سے قتل کیا گیا، مومند ایجنسی میں ہنگو میں مصری خان کو قتل کیا گیا. ہزاروں لوگ ہیں جو قتل ہوئے ہیں، جو اٹھائے گئے، جن پہ ظلم ہو. ہمارے اپنے دوست صحافی جو ہیں ان کو اٹھایا گیا ایجنسیوں کی طرف سے، تشدد کیا گیا، ویڈیو بنوائی گئی اور کہا گیا ان کی نوکریاں ختم کروائی گئی. تو یہ سارے کام ہوئے ہمارے ساتھ. لیکن اگر آپ انسانی حقوق کی پامالیوں پر بات نہیں کریں گے، رپورٹ نہیں کریں گے، کام نہیں کریں گے، تو ملک سدھرے گا کیسے اور آگے بڑھے گا کیسے؟ اور اس ایک بہت اہم بات ہے کہ اگر میڈیا، سول سوسائٹی، سیاسی پارٹیاں، تحریکیں ان سب چیزوں پر کام کریں گی، ہمت کریں گی، تو ان کو ٹارگٹ تو کیا جاتا ہے، جس پہ بات بھی ہو رہی ہے. لیکن یہ بات صرف مارنے تک محدود نہیں ہے، جیسے کہا قتل بھی کرتے ہیں، لیکن ان سب کے ساتھ جو ایک مسلسل اذیت والی بات ہے، ہراساں کرنا، مسلسل ہراساں کرنا، مسلسل دھمکیاں دینا، غائب کرنا، دربدر کرنا، نوکریاں ختم کرنا، خاندان، پورے خاندان کو، مطلب صرف آپ نہیں ٹارگٹ ہوتے، آپ کا پورا خاندان ٹارگٹ ہوتا ہے، آپ سے منسلک لوگ جو ہیں وہ ٹارگٹ ہوتے ہیں. غداری کا ٹیگ لگنا تو بہت آسان ہے، یہاں سب کے پاس موجود ہے، لیکن غداری کے کیسز بنانا بہت آسان ہے پاکستان میں ان اداروں کے لیے. اگر ہم تھوڑا سا پختونخوا کا ذکر کریں، میں نے کہا یہاں محکوم کام سارے، چاہے وہ بلوچ ہیں، پشتون ہیں، سندھی ہیں، یا کوئی کمیونٹیز جو مائنورٹی کمیونٹیز ہیں، چاہے وہ ہندو ہے، ان کا فورس کنورژن ہو رہا ہے، وہ میڈیا بلیک آؤٹ فیس کر رہے ہیں، چاہے وہ ہزارہ ہیں، ان کی جینوسائڈ ہو رہا ہے تو وہ بلیک آؤٹ فیس کر رہے ہیں. لیکن جب ہم پشتونوں کی بات کرتے ہیں، دیکھیں میں یہ سمجھتی ہوں کہ 1948 بابڑا کا جو واقعہ ہے، بادشاہ خان کے گرفتاری پر جو احتجاج ہوتا ہے، 600 سے اوپر لوگوں کو مارا جاتا ہے، میڈیا میں نہیں آتا. اور جو لوگ مارے اور شہید کر دیے جاتے ہیں، پھر ان سے شہیدوں کا الگ جرمانہ گولیوں کا لیا جاتا ہے اور زخمیوں کا الگ لیا جاتا ہے. ٹھیک ہے، وہ وہاں ختم ہوا، اس کی بات نہیں کرتے. تھوڑا سا نیچے آتے ہیں، پچھلے 40 سالوں میں دیکھیں، تقریباً 38 سال یا 40 سال پہلے پاکستان میں ضیاء کے دور میں اسٹریٹجک پالیسی بنتی ہے جنرل اختر عبد الرحمان اور جنرل حمید گل کی سربراہی میں. نصاب بنتا ہے، میڈیا کو میں نیریٹیوز اور بیانیے آتے ہیں، ہماری زمین، ہمارے لوگ استعمال ہوتے ہیں جہاد کے نام پر، قتل عام ہوتا ہے. اور یہ ہم نہیں کہتے، یہ ان کے اپنے جرنیل اپنی کتابوں میں، اپنے انٹرویوز میں اٹھا کے دیکھ لیں. یہ جنرل حمید گل بھی کہتا ہے، یہ کرنل امام بھی کہتے ہیں، یہ مشرف صاحب اپنی 2015 کی دنیا نیوز کے انٹرویو میں کہتے ہیں کہ ریلیجس ملیٹنسی ہم نے تخلیق کی، ہم نے بنائی. وہ اسی انٹرویو میں یہ بھی کہتے ہیں کہ ہمارے لیے اسامہ اور حقانی جو تھے وہ ہیروز تھے. تو جب کسی ملک میں کسی ادارے کے لیے یہ ہیروز ہوتے ہیں تو اس پہ رپورٹ کرنا، اس پہ بات کرنا، قتل عام ہونا، پھر جرنلسٹ کا مرنا، سیاسی ورکرز کا مرنا، لیڈرز کا مرنا بہت آسان ہو جاتا ہے، بہت آسان ہو جاتا ہے. جہاں آپ کے ہیروز جو ہیں وہ تشدد سے منسلک ہوں تو پھر عدم تشدد پہ یقین کرنا مشکل ہو جاتا ہے. پھر تھوڑا سا آتے ہیں، تھوڑا سا اور نزدیک آتے ہیں، 40 سال سے بھی نیچے آتے ہیں، 9/11 کی بات کریں. 9/11 کے بعد آپریشنز کا ایک سلسلہ شروع ہوا. اچھی بات ہے، آپ ختم کریں، دہشت گردوں کو ختم کریں، اور پھر اس میں آپ ایک سلسلہ میں زیادہ تفصیل میں نہیں جاؤں گی، میں بہت محدود بات کروں گی اس پہ. بہت بڑے بڑے جو آپریشن ہیں اس میں راہ حق ہے، راہ حق 1 2 3 2007 سے 2009 سوات اور شانگلہ یہ چلا. صراط مستقیم ہے خیبر میں، منگل باغ اور یہ سارے طالبان کے خلاف چلا. ٹھیک ہے، شیر دل باجوڑ میں چلا 2009. پھر آپ کا آتا ہے یہ بلیک تھنڈر سٹارم بنیر لوور دیر شانگلہ ڈسٹرکٹ میں 2009 میں چلا. بریخنا 2009 مومند ایجنسی میں چلا. ٹھیک ہے، پھر راہ نجات وزیرستان 2009، اور پھر آخر میں ضرب عزب جو ہے وہ 2014 میں نارتھ وزیرستان میں چلتا ہے. پھر رد الفساد 2017 میں اکراس دا کنٹری اور اسپیسیفکلی پختونخوا اور فارمر فاٹا کے اور پاٹا کے علاقوں میں چلتا ہے. یہ سارے آپریشنز ہوتے ہیں. جب یہ سارے آپریشن ہوتے ہیں، دیکھیں جہاں پہ آپریشن ہوتا ہے، جہاں پہ کانفلکٹ ہوتا ہے، آپ خود ایکسپٹ کرتے ہیں اپنے انٹرویوز میں, اپنی کتابوں میں, کہ ہم نے طالبان لائے دنیا کے کونے کونے سے, ان کو وزیرستان میں, فاٹا میں اور فارمر فاٹا میں اور پھر پختونخوا میں ان کو آباد کروایا. اور آپ یہ بھی مانتے ہیں کہ ہم نے روس کو شکست دینے کے لیے کام کیا. پھر آپ جب بنا لیتے ہیں تو سلیپنگ سیلز جب بنتے ہیں تو وہ واپس نکلتے بھی ہیں. پھر جب آپ کو ضرورت ہوتی ہے آپ ان کو نکال لیتے ہیں, جب نہیں ہوتی تو آپ کہتے ہیں ان کی کمر ٹوٹ گئی ہے. یہ ساری چیزیں جب ہوتی ہیں تو وہاں ہیومن رائٹس وائلیشن بھی ہوتی ہیں, وہاں وار کرائمز بھی ہوتے ہیں, وہاں بہت سارے ایشوز ہوتے ہیں. اور یہ سارے ایشوز جب ہوتے ہیں تو اس دوران میں اگر سیاسی لوگ بات کرتے ہیں, دیکھیں ایشوز یہ نہیں ہوتے. جب ہم کہتے ہیں کہ یہ جب جنگی جرائم ہوتے ہیں تو جنگی جرائم میں وہاں پہ لینڈ مائنز بھی ہوتے ہیں, وہاں ان کی ہیومن رائٹس کی وائلیشن بھی ہوتی ہے, وہاں ان کی ہراسائی بھی ہوتی ہے, کاروبار اکانومی تباہ ہوتی ہے, تعلیمی مراکز, صحت کے مراکز کو اڑایا گیا. 1600 سے اوپر فاٹا اور پختونخوا میں صرف لڑکیوں کے اسکولوں کو تباہ کیا گیا. لاکھوں گھر جو ہے وہ IDPs بنے, وہ اپنے گھروں سے نکلے, جبری لوگوں کو گمشدہ کیا گیا. دیکھیں عوامی نیشنل پارٹی نے یا پختونخوا ملی عوام پارٹی یا کسی اور پارٹی نے جب بھی انہوں نے بات کی تو میرے خیال میں عوامی نیشنل پارٹی کے کوئی 1000 یا 1600 سے اوپر ان کے لوگوں کو لیڈروں سمیت شہید کیا گیا اگر انہوں نے ان چیزوں پر بات کی. اسی طرح اگر جرنلسٹوں نے مکرم خان سمیت, مصری خان سمیت اور یہ سارے جو ہیں لسٹ میں, ان سب نے جب بات کی, ان کو رپورٹ کیا, ان کو قتل کیا گیا, ان کو اٹھایا گیا, ان کو جبری گمشدہ کیا گیا, پھر بلایا گیا. پھر ایک 2018 میں نقیب محسود کے قتل پر ایک بہت بڑی جنگ مخالف تحریک بنتی ہے پی ٹی ایم کے ڈیمانڈز بہت سمپل ہے, لینڈ مائنز کو ختم کرو, کیونکہ آئے روز آج بھی آپ کے ریکارڈ کے لیے آج بھی وزیرستان میں اور جنگ زدہ علاقوں میں بچوں پہ, جانوروں پہ, عورتوں پہ یہ لینڈ مائنز پھٹتے ہیں اور وہ اپنے ہاتھ کھو دیتے ہیں اور بڑے کیسز میں وہ جان سے بھی جاتے ہیں. فیئر ٹرائل کا حق جبری گمشدہ لوگوں کے لیے پاکستان کے آئین کے آرٹیکل 10 اور 10A میں یہ موجود ہے کہ یہ حق ہے ہر سٹیزن کا کہ اس کو فیئر ٹرائل کا حق دیا جائے. ہم یہ نہیں کہتے کہ آپ ان لوگوں کے, ہم سے اکثر کہا جاتا ہے کہ انہوں نے تو فوجیوں کے سروں سے فٹ بال کھیلا. دیکھیں ٹھیک ہے, آپ ان کو عدالتوں میں لائیں, اگر وہ مجرم ہے, اگر وہ ثابت ہوتا ہے تو پھر ان کو سزا دیں, اگر نہیں ہے تو 10 سال سے 12 سال سے عورتیں انتظار کر رہی ہیں, رول رہی ہیں. یہ پاکستان ریاست ایسے تو نہیں ہے کہ ان کے پاس کوئی سوشل سیکیورٹی پلان ہو ان خواتین کے لیے, ان کے لیے کوئی راہ ہو کہ وہ اپنے آپ کو کیسے پالیں. آپ ان کا ایک رزق کمانے والے بندے کو اٹھا کے لے کے جاتے ہیں, 7 سال بعد چھوڑتے ہیں, کہتے ہیں غلطی سے اٹھایا گیا آپ کو. مینٹل ہیلتھ کی ایشو پر بنتے ہیں. چیک پوسٹوں پہ ہم نے کہا کہ ذرا انسان کی عظمت کو دیکھا جائے, ہیومن ڈگنیٹی کے مطابق لوگوں کو ٹریٹ کیا جائے. ایکسٹرا جوڈیشل کلنگ کو ختم کیا جائے. راہ انور سمیت جس پہ ثابت ہو چکا ہے کہ 444 قتل انہوں نے کیے ہیں, ان کو سزا دی جائے. پھر ٹروتھ اینڈ ریکنسیلیشن کمیشن کی بات کرتے ہیں کہ جو بھی ان آپریشنز کے دوران ہوا یا اس سے پہلے ہوا, جو بھی ہوا ان علاقوں میں, آپ ان کو مان لیں, ان پہ معافی مانگے, آگے کی بات کریں. اور سویلین سپریمیسی کی بات کرتے ہیں. کیا کسی بھی ملک میں سویلین سپریمیسی کی بات کرنا برا ہے؟ کیا ان میں انسانوں کے حقوق پر بات کرنا غلط ہے؟ لیکن اگر ہم ان 3.5 سال میں ریاستی اداروں کو دیکھیں تو انہوں نے 2018 سے ہمارے لوگوں کو شہید کیا. میں پی ٹی ایم کی بات کر رہی ہوں. جھوٹے کیس بنائے مجھ سمیت. مجھ پہ اس وقت جو کیسز قواش ہو چکے ہیں ان کے علاوہ مجھ پہ 14 کیسز ہیں سیڈیشن کے, غداری کے, انسائٹ کرنے کے لوگوں کو, اور یہ ہیں کیمپین کرنے کے, رپورٹ کرنے کے, ڈاکومنٹ کرنے, کسی بھی ایشو کو ڈاکومنٹ کر کے میڈیا آؤٹلیٹس جو ہمیں ٹائم دیتے ہیں ان کو بھیجنے کے لیے, یا جس کسی کا بھی ایکسیس ہے انٹرنیٹ تک اس کو بھیجنے کے لیے. نوکریوں سے نکلوایا, ACL میں ڈالا ہمارے سارے لوگوں کو. تقریباً جون وانا میں 6 لوگ شہید کروائے. 2019 میں ہمارے بہت نزدیکی دوست, ہمارے سینٹرل کمیٹی کے ممبر پروفیسر رحمان لونی کو دن دہاڑے لورلائی میں بندوق کے بٹ مار کر ان کو شہید کیا گیا. 2019 میں خڑ کمر میں پرامن احتجاجوں میں بچوں اور نوجوانوں پر گولیاں برسائی گئی. 14 لوگ شہید ہوئے, 40 کے قریب لوگ جو ہے وہ زخمی ہوئے. اس میں 2 سٹنگ MNAs کو جیل میں ڈالا گیا دہشت گردی کے مقدمات میں. پھر نکلے. پھر ہمارے ابھی بھی اس وقت ہمارا علی وزیر صاحب سٹنگ MNA ہیں, ان کو ایک کراچی کے جلسے کے جرم میں ان کو جیل میں ڈالا گیا. وہ ابھی بھی کراچی کی جیل میں ہیں. ایسے حنیف پشتین ہمارا بنوں کا بندہ ہے, وہ ورکر ہے, وہاں سے وہ جیل میں ہے. بہت سارے لوگ پہ جھوٹے کیسز ہیں, بہت سارے لوگ ٹرائلز. میں خود ہر ماہ تقریباً 5 دفعہ عدالتوں میں جاتی ہوں اور پیش ہوتی ہوں. ہم قانون کی پاسداری کرتے ہیں, ہم قانون کو مانتے ہیں, لیکن 2000 میں تھوڑا سا کم کروں گی, جلدی سے اس کو ریپ اپ کرنے کی کوشش کرتی ہوں. 2020 میں منظور پشتین کو جیل میں ڈالا گیا, عارف وزیر کو 2020 میں شہید کروایا گیا معلوم افراد کی طرف سے. اگر میں صرف اپنی بات کروں, بہت مختصر کروں گی, میں جرنلسٹ والے اس پہ نہیں جاؤں گی, جہاں پہ میں نے اگر ٹریک ٹو انڈیا اور پاکستان کے ٹریک ٹو ڈپلومیسی پہ اسٹوری کی تو مجھے پیش ہونا پڑا. اور بائی دا وے پی ٹی ایم سے پہلے بھی پچھلے 13 سال میں نے بہت دفعہ ڈیٹینشن فیس کی, اریسٹ ہوئی, جاب سے نکالی گئی. لیکن جب پی ٹی ایم بنتا ہے, میں صرف اس کی بات کرتی ہوں کہ اس میں پاکستان ٹیلی ویژن نیٹ ورک کے ساتھ کام کیا, پختونخوا ریڈیو کے ساتھ کام کیا, اور ایز اے فیچر رائٹر کچھ اداروں کے ساتھ کام کیا. باقی تو ہوئے نہیں ہوئے. پی ٹی وی سے مجھے نکالا گیا اور مجھے یہ کہا گیا پروگرام مینیجر کی طرف سے کہ اوپر سے آرڈر آیا. وہ اوپر انہوں نے کہا کہ آپ کو پتا ہے اوپر کون ہے, مجھے نہیں بتایا گیا. 2018 میں ECL میں ڈالا گیا. وہ بہت لمبا قصہ ہے, 2.5 سال میرا کیس پشاور ہائی کورٹ میں چلا. اللہ بخشے وقار سیٹھ صاحب نے نکالا, لیکن پھر بھی 2019 میں کورٹ فیصلہ کرتی ہے. 21 تک میں انتظار کرتی ہوں. کنٹمپٹ آف کورٹ کے بعد 21 میں مجھے ملتا ہے. I'm very sorry مہوش, بس میں اس کو ختم کرنے جا رہی ہوں. یہ ایک دن دہاڑے پشاور میں مجھ پہ بندوقیں رکھی گئی صرف اس لیے کہ میں نے اپنے شہید دوست کے لیے جلسہ کروایا. میں نے محمد ایجنسی میں ایک خاتون, جس نے اپنے ڈیفینس میں ایک سیکورٹی پرسن جو ان کے گھر میں گھسنے کی کوشش کر رہا تھا, اس کی سٹوری معلوم نہیں ہو رہی تھی کیونکہ فار فلنگ ایریاز میں آپ کو سٹوری نہیں ملتی. اس کی سٹوری کو ڈاکومنٹ کرنے اور میڈیا تک پہنچانے کی اس میں الزام میں اور جلسہ اور احتجاج آرگنائز کرنے میں دن دہاڑے مجھے بندوقیں رکھی گئی اور مجھے آخری وارننگ دی گئی. اور یہ آخری وارننگ جو ہے یہ آپ کو پریس بریفنگ میں ملیں گی. آصف غفور نے جو 2019 میں جرنلسٹوں کو پریس بریفنگ اور تھینک یو کیا کہ بلیک آؤٹ کر رہے ہیں, تو کسی بھی چیز کو بلیک آؤٹ کرنے سے کوئی وہ نہیں. اور آخری ریکمنڈیشن یہ ہے کہ اگر پاکستان کو چلانا ہے اور سویلین سپریمیسی پر یقین کرنا ہوگا, عمل کرنا ہوگا. جانی خیل کا دھرنا چل رہا ہے, محمد مسنگ پرسنز کا دھرنا چل رہا ہے, انفورس ڈس اپیرنس کو ان کو عدالتوں میں پیش کرنا ہوگا. بیجا سینسرشپ, صحافیوں کو کنٹرول کرنا, مارنا, پیٹنا, غائب کرنا, قتل کرنا, انسانی حقوق اور سیاسی ورکرز کی پٹائی اٹھانا, یہ سب ختم کرنا ہوگا. معاشی استحصال ختم کرنا ہوگا. پاکستان اور تمام اقوام کے لیے, تمام اقوام, کیونکہ یہ ایک وفاقی ریاست ہے, یہ کسی ایک مخصوص کام کے لیے نہیں ہے. تو UDHR, سیڈا, CRC اور اصل میں پاکستان کے آئین کے اندر جو بنیادی انسانی حقوق ہیں ان پر عمل درآمد کرنا ہوگا. فارن پالیسی کو الیکٹڈ پارلیمنٹ کے حوالے کرنا ہو, تبھی پاکستان رہ سکے گا, تبھی پاکستان بڑھ سکے گا اور ترقی کر سکے گا. اور اسی دن کے لیے ہم یہ کوششیں کر رہے ہیں. تو غداری کے ٹیگ بے شک لگے, ہم اپنا کام جاری رکھیں گے. بہت شکریہ, بہت شکریہ.
بہت شکریہ Sanna ji. Also an incredibly rich talk, and now Dr. Zoha Wasim will come on and give us a short summary of the talk. Best of luck, Zoha. It's a very rich talk. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mahvish, and thank you, Sanna ji, for such a powerful presentation. As Mahvish said, it was very, very rich. So for our English-speaking audience members, I'm just going to briefly summarize some of the key points that Sanna ji made, so that everyone's caught up. And it's obviously not easy to summarize such strong insights in a short amount of time. But essentially, Sanna ji began by explaining that Pakistan is a security state where security institutions feel that journalists, human rights activists, and political workers, as well as our internal security threats, if they criticize and vocalize their dissent. And over the past several years, thousands of people have been killed, abducted, tortured, and many have been removed from their places of employment. She asked that a journalist cannot report on human rights issues, then how will Pakistan progress? She also mentioned that the constant harassment and abuse and repression of journalists and activists, as well as their families and friends, and these tags of treason and sedition are making things increasingly difficult for members of all communities in Pakistan, especially minority communities, including Hazaras. She also mentioned that Pashtuns especially have suffered because of state violence, and the media is not able to report on this adequately. She gave a brief historical background when 4 decades ago during General Zia's rule, there was a strategic policy to fight jihad, and Pashtuns were made to participate in this jihad. And this policy was the foundation of, has been the foundation of contemporary religious extremism in Pakistan and the region more broadly. And this has been recognized by state leadership as well. And then post 9/11, Pakistan saw a series of military and security operations to defeat religious extremism and terrorism, and a series of operations against the Taliban coincided with leadership recognizing that the Taliban were created by the state and patronized by the state. But these operations also led to a series of war crimes, state crimes, and human rights violations. But when politicians and activists speak out against such crimes and violations, and raise awareness about the lack of education in these areas, about the status IDPs, about missing persons, etc. This is not tolerated. Sanna ji also spoke about PTM, the Pashtun Tahaffuz movement that began in 2018 after the killing of Nakibullah Masood, and PTM has been demanding the removal of, among other demands, the removal of landmines, fair trials, and an end to enforced disappearances and extrajudicial killings. These demands remain largely unmet and need to be addressed. Furthermore, she emphasized that we need civilian supremacy, and calls for civilian supremacy should not be silenced. Documenting the issues of human rights and access to justice should not be undermined. She also documented the continued arrests, detentions, criminalization, torture of young people, members of the National Assembly, and killings of activists and journalists more broadly. And then she concluded by mentioning her own personal experience of harassment and repression, her affiliation with the Pashtun Tahaffuz movement, or PTM, and her own activism led to her removal from a news channel with which she was employed, PTV, and she was also arrested and recently released without charge. So I'll stop here so other speakers have enough time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for a wonderful summary. I'd like to ask Matiullah Jansab to please come on and share his thoughts. Matiullah Sab?
Okay.
Yeah, wonderful.
Okay.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Thank you. Now you see me. Huh?
Yes, we can hear you and see you.
All right. Now I don't see you, or I don't see anyone. Anyway.
No, it's just you on right now, so we can focus on you. Then we'll come back on.
All right. All right. Okay. I've heard both Asad, Toor, and Sanna, and everything they have said. I completely endorse the situation as has been described by them. But I will go forward from what has already been said about the situation in Pakistan. And I would like to contextualize all this, which is happening in terms of human rights violation, and particularly independence of press and free media in Pakistan. It is important to understand for our national and international audience that Pakistan has been a strategic partner from the very beginning of the West, particularly the United States. And unfortunately, starting with the first martial law in 1958, 10 years after the creation of Pakistan, of Field Marshal Ayub Khan when he took over, that was a time when the United States needed a general here, maybe to fight this Cold War for them against the perceived US or communistic expansion in the region. And then came the second dictator. Once again, the United States needed a General Ziaul Haq type dictator to stop the then USSR, the Soviet Union forces, from reaching out to the warm waters from Afghanistan through Pakistan to the Arabian Sea. And then third military dictator came when the United States needed us to have another Afghanistan war. And again, General Musharraf and another tin-pot dictator came handy. Unfortunately, while we do talk about what is happening in Pakistan, we tend to ignore that what are the strategic reasons because of which these dictators get the courage and a pat on the back to violate the constitution, subvert the constitution, and take over. And they continue to rule this country for around 10 years. And never Pakistan's democracy has been in its pure form, completing such a long period of time being in the government. So dictators are a bit lucky thanks to their strategic partnership. And unfortunately, because of such past alliances, democracy has been the biggest victim of our strategic, so-called strategic location and so-called strategic friends and partners. Even today, when we look at the kind of government in Pakistan, we have no shame now. Even some of the ruling party people shamelessly agree and admit that this is a hybrid form of government. And they have no shame in actually accepting that the constitution really cannot work as it is, but they have to coexist with the military and the military establishment. And they very proudly express the belief that the military and the elected government of Pakistan, they are on the same page. Contrary to what the constitution tells them, that it is the federal government which commands and controls the armed forces of Pakistan. And they simply ignore this constitutional obligation. Whatever has happened in last general elections in July 2018, this is an example of how things have gone from bad to worse in Pakistan, from a declared martial law to an undeclared martial law, where the institutions like parliament, judiciary, and media, they seem to be working very normally, but actually they are working in a worst possible manner, even worse than we had these declared martial laws, the Field Marshal Ayub Khan, General Yahya, General Ziaul Haq, General Musharraf. It is because there has been a continuation of dictatorship in this country, whereas we desperately needed to have a continuation of democracy in the country. The dictatorship and the military rulers ruled this country for about 40 years, and the democracy only 32 years in different patches and piecemeals. And while the dictators actually ruled this Pakistan for almost all its life, except for a brief period of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, where he was considered as a powerful prime minister from 1971, when he became president, to 1977, when the elections were held. And thereafter, he was hanged on a concocted murder case by the then dictator, General Ziaul Haq. So except for this period, we had long stints of martial laws. And the institution, unfortunately, of dictatorship has flourished so much that they continue to exist behind the curtain, even if we have such semblance of democracy. The government of Imran Khan is just a facade of democracy. And the July 2018 elections were politically engineered. And it was for those elections that everything started happening to media in Pakistan. I was also in part of the Waqt News television, and many things happened, and I would not go into details. All the incidents that Asad Toor has mentioned, almost same kind of attacks and intimidation techniques were applied on me as well. Just before the last general elections, there were even terrorist threat alerts issued in my name. The military spokesman, in one of his official press conferences on live television, showed my picture on one of the slides along with some other media organizations, saying that this is an anti-social, anti-army, and anti-state network. They did not name me, but my picture was very prominent, and accusing me and others of retweeting and sharing the social media messages and posts of the anti-army and anti-state elements. Then we had this threat alert just before the election, so that some journalists, including myself, they are unable to go out and report the elections. And the threat alert said that some terrorist group from Afghanistan, they are planning to target these journalists, and my name was among those journalists. And then I was actually attacked while traveling with my family once in my car. And then the second incident, of course, happened last year when I was picked up from outside the school of my wife, where she teaches. Armed, uniformed people, armed and actually displaying the official insignias, logos, police cars with siren, police lights, weapons. They picked me up, abducted me, tortured me, and after 9 hours, they released me late midnight because of the reaction, strong reaction from social media and international community and some of the governments and international organizations. So, and there since then, for the last 2 years, I'm unemployed because there is a tacit threat and warning to all the media organizations not to employ him. I'm not even allowed to speak and share my experiences as analyst on any TV channel. My columns were stopped from the Naviva group where I used to contribute every week. And now I have lost my own YouTube channel, MJTV. And even now, I am conveyed that whatever I'm reporting is off the mark, and it amounts to crossing the lines. And my tweets on social media, the Supreme Court also, unfortunately, is taking a stand which is unconstitutional against the free speech right. And they issued me with a contempt of court notice. And unfortunately, as I said before, all these institutions, Parliament, Supreme Court, and media seems to be working normally, but they are not. And they are actually afraid of whatever is happening, and they are afraid to take a stand on such issues. I will particularly point out the role being played by the main opposition parties. And looking at what has happened to them, particularly the ruling party, the last ruling party of Pakistan Muslim League Noon, led by Nawaz Sharif, who's in exile now. I think he and the government before that of Pakistan People's Party of Mr. Asad Zardari, both of them, they were so desperate to complete their terms of government that they, in that desperation of completing their terms, they conceded a lot of political space and compromised with the powerful military establishment and empowered and encouraged the military establishment and the secret agencies to do more in terms of political engineering. And this is where it's a big failure on the part of these political leadership. And even today, while being in opposition, they are not behaving like real politicians and political parties. They do issue statements, condemnations, they give slogans, but they have no strategy to work with. And they do not tell the people that what exactly is the problem. They do hint at the problems between the lines and not clearly telling the people what exactly is the problem. And in the meantime, the biggest challenge now is that this generation, young generation of Pakistan, which has been brainwashed by the long tenures of the military rulers, they are again being brainwashed against the democratic process. And now the young people raise questions like, what is democracy? What democracy has given us? And it would be unfortunate if our youth is raising such questions and our politicians are doing nothing to educate them and tell them about the real problem. And the real problem, as I say, is the lack of democracy in Pakistan, because it is only with the democracy that we will be able to claim the right to free speech and to fight for it. And I think this is where we are failing as parliament, as political parties, as judiciary, and as media also. So that's all I could say. And I thought it is important to contextualize the main issue. The biggest problem here is that there is no democracy and no one is fighting for it even now. Because if there is no democracy, all these discussions about having a free speech and having other rights as per the Constitution is futile. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for another very rich talk, Matisab. Last but not least, Rabia, Mike, the floor is yours.
So thank you, Mahvish. I hope everyone can listen to me and the signal is working. My connection is working. Thank you to Mahvish and the co-organizers of the event, and also Matiullah Sahab, Sanna and Asad for these very sort of hard-hitting and honest, brutally honest talks. And yes, like Matiullah Sahab has said, that it's all futile, there is no democracy. On that very depressing and realistic note, I am going to try and speak about some of the rights violations that we have here, that we have to still keep talking about. Everyone has really given a very is very useful and complete picture of what the situation and what repression looks like in Pakistan. So I'm also going to try and focus on like one or two things. I would like to start by saying that if there was like that there has been a continuous crackdown and clampdown on dissent and in Pakistan, and repression has been going on, not just in the current regime, but also prior to that. But in the current regime, since 2018, it has just escalated to really maddening degrees. There was always censorship, there was always impunity when it came to targeting of journalists and rights defenders. There was always misuse and abuse of blasphemy laws and religion to target minorities and those who support minorities and political dissidents elsewhere. There were enforced disappearances have been going on for decades in Pakistan, but it's just that during this current government, as Matiullah Sahab has said, that it's more of a farce of a democracy. All of these have escalated, and the kind of repression which is ongoing at the moment is, in our times, we have not seen it in such a widespread way. Of course, I do know and I do acknowledge that for the ethnic minority groups and for groups, for instance, people in former FATA, those communities at the margins in Balochistan, the repression has been very real for a long time. But now we see that the state increasingly uses and weaponizes two things a lot more, and very sort of casually, and so much so that we've even accepted it. It's the narrative around national security and sanctity of Islam. And if there was, if we do like a checklist of state repression, of different types of state repression, Pakistan ticks all these boxes. And like people have mentioned, attacks on human rights defenders, censorship of press, physical assault on journalists, false police cases, which are based on fabricated charges. Like Sanna said, there are 14 against her. There is, Asad has faced cases, Matiullah Sahab has faced cases, which use draconian legislation like sedition, treason, anti-terrorism charges, and Pakistan Electronic Crime Acts, and the social media rules, which were gazetted last year. And then there are arbitrary detentions, short-term disappearances, raids on residences and offices of journalists, activists, and rights defenders. There is continuous judicial and police harassment of activists and their families. For instance, the case of Gulale Ismail, award-winning woman human rights defender from KP, who was forced into exile and also forced into seeking asylum in the US. But when she left, her family has been brutally there has been a brutal witch hunt of her parents in Pakistan, and her father, who's an activist himself, has been arrested more than once, and they have faced like some of the worst form of judicial harassment. So, Professor Ismail, then there has been disruption of protests, of peaceful assembly. There has been use of force against protesters, which are so dissent in any form, right? It doesn't really have to be HIDs and journalists themselves, but like, you know, teachers who come out for their rights, or government employees who come out for their rights on the streets, or women health workers who come out for their rights. Even their protests have been met with force. That's how the security state now operates. And, you know, the state has increasingly blurred lines between detentions, arrests, and disappearances. And in fact, the way disappearances and short-term disappearances and arbitrary detentions have been used as a sort of a very specific tool for repression in Pakistan, we are increasingly seeing that like we also have to struggle with like a legal language and a legal context in for that, because of how these detentions and disappearances kind of like overlap with each other and take place in the country. Of course, what happened to Matiullah Sahab, like he was disappeared for a day, is one example of that. So I also want to sort of talk about how all of this happens, and one of the key way the state is repressing people and making all of the above happen is also through severe surveillance. And surveillance is physical and digital, and it's both offline and online. Of course, physical surveillance is like continuous following of people, journalists, activists, dissidents, rights defenders, women rights activists, and student activists, you know, students who are basically just engaging in some healthy political activity while going to universities or on campuses. They are very deeply, very religiously followed physically by intelligence officials, and we have enough evidence to say this on authority. And physical surveillance also of journalists and activists and dissidents themselves, but also of their family members. So, and it continues, you know, the families are harassed. This is also a part of harassment of families, and it also continues surveillance, you know, parking cars outside people's homes, outside their offices, following them in cars, and sometimes letting them know that they are being followed. So that's physical surveillance. Then there's also monitoring of social media activity and continuous obsession the state has with the social media activity of citizens, of journalists, and also of activists. And PTM is one example how the accounts of PTM supporters are monitored, but also not just Pashtun people who are supporters of PTM and sort of like members, not that PTM is a membership or membership-based organization, but also activists who are from other ethnic groups, who are allies and who are based in other cities. Even they have been monitored, or their social media is monitored, and like it's and you know, intelligence officials, they sift through their feeds to see what are they saying in support of PTM or not. So that's one form. And then there is very severe digital surveillance that we see, and we have increasingly seen over the past 5-6 years, is through using surveillance technology to intercept communications and to sort of record real-time data and communication through some very sophisticated digital surveillance technology, and sort of block content and the kind of web monitoring systems and softwares and surveillance technology that the Pakistani state is using has a bad history, right? of oppressing or repression in other countries. So these things are on record. So, and of course, whenever we find out about such things, and it's also linked to legislation like social media rules and Pakistan Electronic Crimes Act and other hordes of legislation which allow the security and law enforcement and intelligence agencies and authorities to confiscate devices or to monitor data or to intercept communication. These are also bought. The Pakistan state is buying these from other countries and from companies which are based in, for instance, from like Canada-based companies, US-based companies, Germany-based companies, Switzerland-based companies, the UK-based companies. So there is like a big list of also like a significant list of these other foreign countries which continuously also talk about human rights and pressures, and even as activists we look towards them for support, sometimes from like the diplomatic sections and others, but at the same time they are enabling surveillance and repression in our countries. In Pakistan, the Pakistani authorities have used spyware and malware to target right defenders. It's on record. It's been like documented by human rights organizations and even the other sort of forms of digital surveillance I've mentioned. It's on, everything has been documented and recorded by digital researchers and rights organizations like Amnesty International and Citizen Data Lab, etc. And there is no end in sight to digital surveillance. And I think the goal is to completely control. The goal is to not so data control and data monitoring and communication interception is all done in like sort of the garb of, counterterrorism or like protection of national security or sometimes even the most harmless of things. For instance, a web monitoring system was used to track and trace sort of during the pandemic even. But the ultimate goal and a big concern of rights groups and people like us and other civil societies that it's going to be used to control speech and used to block and control, civil society and journalists and generally citizens. And another, if I have time, the last thing that I really want to focus on is the way internet and is used to target activists and journalists and minorities through smear campaigns and through very dangerous, harmful campaigns, which puts lives at risk. And sometimes religion is also sort of brought into this mix, and it's used as a tool of repression. And we have known this for, so first a bit of context that for so many, like 6, 7, 8 years, we've seen that, and there are thousands of accounts we've seen on Facebook and Twitter, where if you see the about section or their sort of Twitter bios, they have 3 things in common, which is that they love the Pakistan military and intelligence agencies, and they love Islam, in quotes, and they would not tolerate anything which targets these two. And now increasingly over the past 2 or 3 years, what we're seeing is that there is more of a sort of addition of, protection of prophethood or blasphemy laws is added, or a particular minority like Ahmadis are mentioned specifically as like sort of an identity marker on these accounts. And these accounts, while they started appearing like 7 or 8 years back on our social media, and they were quite dangerous because they targeted people like Sabine Mahmood, journalists, and some key very influential activists online. And they carried out in occasional smear campaign, a dangerous campaign against them, calling them or implying that they are they've committed blasphemy. That used to happen, but now what we are seeing is, and they always carried out coordinated attacks. That now we have a language for that, and it's gotten more and more. I mean, it's been documented and researched that there is an overlap between like the support that the way these accounts support. The policies of the security establishment and the way they jump on bandwagons of like blasphemy accusations. And these are very coordinated attacks by these groups, and they benefit the, they are also like, for instance, they're used against, now increasingly used against active, very critical journalists who are critical of state policies. They are used against activists who are very vocal, and they target the against state policies or military establishment. I would not name the hashtags, but like just recently, not specifically religion related, but talking about smear campaigns, one journalist, Asma Shirazi, has been, targeted in a recent campaign. Of course, she also has a sedition case against her, but we saw this happen with bloggers as well. And there is an overlap of, bloggers were in a similar manner, they were disappeared, and they were also, there was a smear campaign related to blasphemy against them. It was just very convenient how all of these issues intersect. And I think it is fair and it is safe to say that these desks of cyber troll armies are being operated somewhere where, by state institutions, or are sponsored, or being done through these independent agencies who support state narratives, and they are propaganda accounts. So let me see if I have time left. I think I do not have more time. So yes, I'm going to just wrap up and not mention more of these morbid details. But yes, I would just like to say that the state has been using multiple tools and surveillance and religion, and also like disappearances and other tools to carry out the agenda and campaign of repression against anyone who dares to question certain policies of the state.
Thank you so much for a very rich talk. I'm going to ask you to stay on Rabia, and ask all the other speakers also to please turn on your videos and your audio. And while we wait for them to do that, I'd like to encourage all of those listening to please send in questions. Again, you can email them, you can tweet them, and you can also write them up on Facebook and the Facebook chat. So thank you so much to all four of you. I'm going to jump right into some questions we have from the audience. We have 3 questions from Ambar Khairi, and I'm going to read them up quickly. I also encourage each of you to, of course, ask each other. So Ambar Khairi asks, unfortunately, the situation looks very bleak. And what is particularly distressing is how intimidation and attacks on journalists critical of the army's role in politics are met with no public outrage. Given how much money has been invested into indoctrinating and patronizing Ham Khayal journalists, opening and funding journalism departments, organizing journalism workshops, arranging job placements, etc., what can be done to counter the hijacking of the narrative? If you can keep that question in mind, Ambar Khairi has also asked 2 more, and I'd like to pose them straight away. What can be done to counter this? Journalists and activists speaking about human rights and political development are either silenced or sidelined, or have become like voices in the wilderness. How can independent, politically aware, progressive journalists reclaim the narrative in the face of this onslaught and investment? And it would be good to hear everybody's experiences and views on this matter. And finally, and they seem to also be linked, for Matiullah, Asad, Toor, and Sanna, Ejaz, what advice do you give when journalists are faced in a situation of being abducted, attacked, defamed, What should be the toolkit if they ever face such a situation? What should they do to document, question, or minimize the threat of violence? Is social media alert the starting point? Should we set up an emergency platform or a network that can swing into action? So many questions. If you need reminders, I'll try to give them. But why don't we start with Asad, since you haven't spoken for a while. But please, anybody who wants to jump in, please do.
Well, I want to say that on the last question, that what I want to advise if any other journalist get attacked, how to document it and how to take steps that nobody else can face this. First of all, I want to say that I wish that people even who hate me may never face this. So the other thing I want to say that since my attack and even before my attack, when I was receiving threats, I always said that there is no measure to stop it. There are no precautionary measures. The ones who are supposed to provide us security, when they are after our heads, we cannot do anything. They can chase us anywhere. They can get us anywhere. We are always in their reach. So before this attack, I didn't take any security measure. Since the attack, I have again not taken any security measures, because I know no security measure will work the day they will decide to get me. So I don't know what to suggest. I know there are many manuals for security of journalists, and but I don't know if they can work. At least I don't believe that any such thing will work. Yeah, either then stop reporting or start reporting positive. So it may work. The rest, my senior is Matiullah. He is also expert in about such situations. He may can guide or elaborate if there is any step we can take to protect ourselves.
Thank you. I'll actually just open it up to whoever wants to speak next, so we can.
So multiple times I have faced the death threats and narrow days kept, the abductions and things like that. So what I do is I keep some numbers dialed, and whenever I face such things, I just dial them and just let them listen whatever happening to me. And in some cases, I started the live session on my Facebook. So that's the way I saved myself in multiple occasions. But the most important thing is we need allies, we need people, we need networks. Like it's not a good thing, but in one of the incident in Khaisur, one of the very good journalists call it propaganda. When the woman was asking for justice because she was facing harassment from the military. So a very good journalist who was on his embedded journalism invitation there in Waziristan, he called it propaganda. So I think we need more people like us to be in the network, to be aware what are we facing, what are we passing through. So these things can help. And apart from that, I think anything can happen to you. The only thing you can do is be vigilant.
Just a quick note to those listening, we'll be going a little bit over to allow for some of the questions and answers. But yes, Matisab, Rabia, if you'd like to share any thoughts. If you would like to, Matisab, when you're speaking, then you'd have to unmute.
I also have something to add and also to ask Matisa, but if he wants to say something, he can, and I can later on ask him my question and add to what is being asked on journalists.
Okay, sure, Rabia, sure. I would definitely like to talk about these precautions of the safety measures that journalists should take, because I've been part of a research work across Pakistan while being part of the interviews. I was a media law advisor, so I've been telling journalists how to take all important steps. I don't agree with Asad that there is no solution to these steps. The very basic fact that Asad did not have a chain fixed behind the door, which is the first hurdle, he was unable to stop the intruders or even the fisheye on the door. Had that been the case, then the breaking of chain would be another important evidence of what has happened to Asad. So such basic and small security measures, even if they are unable to protect you completely, they do generate a trail of evidence to actually create or guide the investigators who really want to investigate. And this becomes a part of the record. I personally have been exercising this particular method by generating emails. Every time some incident happened, I immediately generated emails and reported that to my boss, immediate boss, or head of the news department. And for the last 12, 13 years, all the emails that I had been writing, they were actually now part of the latest investigations. And I reproduce all that evidence that has been happening to me. So it is important to have some basic security gadgets at home, having cameras, having fisheye, the chain behind the door, and even if possible, cameras in your vehicle, and keeping a track or keeping a location or your WhatsApp location on for your family WhatsApp group, so that they can actually know where you are, where you were lost, and obviously having a password on your mobile, and then immediately reporting the things. If you see anything suspicious, you can even record video, film those suspicious things or people, and immediately share it with someone from your mobile phone. So these are some basic, I think, security precautions you must take, because by doing this, and it is especially for Asad too, by taking all these precautions, you're not just saving yourself, but you're creating a lot of evidentiary pressure and influence on the transgressors for future. And they will come under pressure when they decide to take somebody else out or try to target somebody else, your colleague. So the safety precautions that you take for yourself ultimately will benefit your colleagues and your community members in future. They will learn from it, and they will come to know that how useful these precaution measures are. So whatever you're doing as a journalist is not just for yourself, but also for your fellow men, your colleagues, and other people. And everyone should be encouraged, every professional, not just journalists, that anything suspicious that happens to him, it must be put on record, and email is the best way to put it on record, and starting with for your information and record.
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much, Matisa. This was excellent advice, and also with Sanna, and I do agree that some sort of risk mitigation can be done for physical security, also for digital security. Of course, what journalists and also rights activists face in Pakistan and defenders face in Pakistan is extreme. But being careful and being vigilant can help us and can save us, and we can build mitigation in even the way we do our journalism. And of course, risk assessment is part of what we also can do even before stepping out for research work as activists. So, and even as political organizers, when we have to go out and do our work. And of course, and also this is my question to Matisa as well, is because the media organizations in Pakistan, and most of them are terrible when it comes to journalist security, and have a history of being terrible when it comes to the protection of not just reporters but also other staff. I used to work for television channels myself, and for years I was working, and nobody, even in the midst of when there was so much militancy in Pakistan and we were reporting on terrorist attacks, nobody cared about our physical security, let alone other kinds of securities. And I think the targeting of some of the journalists in sort of the erstwhile areas, it was also due to the lack of security or lack of responsibility that media houses, basically responsibility that they never took for security of their people. So there is that. And of course, I would just say like something as basic as having Signal on your phone and having two-step verification for your social media is something that a lot of, or using secure emails is something which a lot of activists and journalists for the longest time didn't do, and it can be done. My question to Mati Saab is of course, things are terrible. Media also has faced a severe sort of repression through advertisement, sort of controlling of advertisement and like job cuts in the past couple of years. And there has been an issue with security and impunity. Do you think, and I could completely be wrong, but my question is, do you think that the lack of unity amongst, or the lack of consensus amongst the journalists and bodies in the country, and also having like multiple unions, I mean, would we be better off if we had one big central union in terms of like more proper representation with different chapters? Do you think that some of the issues when it comes to seeking, working for freedom of press and security of journalists are also due to the kind of, for the lack of a better term, the lack of unity amongst journalists? Because sometimes we see that people get targeted and some channels won't even name the journalist's name, or won't, I mean, we've seen that over the years, or won't even name the network they worked for, something as basic as that. So what could be the role of the unions and journalist bodies for this? Or can they do something, or are they also like unable to help or resolve this issue at all?
Okay, this is an important question. When we talk about unity among journalists and efficiency of the journalist unions, we presume that the media industry in Pakistan, they all have very competent and ideological, committed and ethical journalists who need to sit together and plan, come up with a joint strategy. Unfortunately, as I have said before in my first presentation, that the basic issue is the challenge to democracy, not just media. And our poor history in this, poor record in this case has, apart from dividing and disintegrating and pressurizing the institutions like parliament and judiciary, the media too has been a victim of such political engineering. And therefore, when we talk about unity among media, we should not forget that today we have a group of so-called patriotic journalists sitting on television screens and actually working for various newspapers, including many of them dummy newspapers, who have no shame in chanting slogans like, I love ISI, I love army, I hate politicians, politicians are corrupt. So such kind of stupid things to say for any educated person. They are trying to give an impression that we don't love army. I, for myself, speaking for myself, I'm son of an army officer. And my father was a colonel in army, he retired. My elder brother was a major in army. That does not mean that we should not speak about the dictators and subversion of constitution by them. It does not stop you from telling the truth to the people that country's survival and future lies in democracy, not in some kind of a bunch of generals ruling this country for many years. So I think when we're talking about unity, it is because today the dictatorial forces, the military establishment, does not just have a political force that they had been using in the past. Today, they are also an economic force. They have many business enterprises who have a lot of business to give to media industry and to media organizations. they have a consortium of many business enterprises who select and appoint and plant particular anchor persons in television channels. And that consortium decides the salaries of those anchor persons and journalists. And the media owners are told that you will get your share, but this anchor will have nothing to do with you because we will pay his salary through you, and you will let him do what we want him to do. So with this kind of financial power now, which has been acquired by the military establishment and the secret institutions, and thanks to the cowardice and timidity of the previous political government, who have given them so much of political and economic space for the last 10, 12 years. So how can we expect that we have a unity in the journalists? Today, with so many fake newspapers and fake websites and fake media, social media accounts, and so many so-called patriotic journalists with YouTube channels who get their subscriptions and views from hired trolls paid by the military establishment, home and abroad. And now they have planned to send many of those young, misguided, brainwashed people abroad for their education, meeting their expenses, and telling them to launch YouTube channels against politicians in Pakistan. And they earn money from YouTube channels because they have a ready-made army of subscribers and viewers to give them business. So this is the kind of influence the military establishment has even within the family of media. So this is where the challenge lies for media, to rid itself of these black sheep. And unfortunately, with the lack of security and the insecurity that media today is facing, neither the media owners nor the media professionals and even the media unions, they are all afraid to take the right step and the ultimate step. They can't even call for a countrywide strike. We are so weak today that we can't even call for a pen down or a camera shutter down strike against such kind of censorship and intimidation. So this is our state of affairs. So the bigger challenge is that the politicians, the political leaders, exiled or in Pakistan, they should take the leadership.
Thank you. These questions and conversation is really fantastic. I want to just double check with the speakers. We're going a little bit over because it would be a shame. So 10 to 15 minutes. Also encourage the audience to send in more questions. We have a question from Zulfi Ali. If the panel could briefly tell us what they think about the sweeping new media regulatory environment the current government is trying to establish that would severely undermine press freedom in the country, and what it would mean for freelance video journalists. All of you have done freelance video journalism or use social media quite directly. So anybody who would like to comment on that?
Okay, if anybody wants to talk, or I may talk about it.
Asad was getting ready to say something, is that correct?
I just wanted to add that this new regulation, this new body is coming just to censor the remaining digital and social media. The rest of the mainstream media, they have already censored. The only problem they have left with is social media and digital media spaces. So this is specifically coming to censor us, who are coming on alternate platforms to fight this censorship.
Sanna?
I think for people like us, even if we are related to a political movement or a journalist, I think social media is the only platform left for us to inform the people, to inform the people about the human rights violation happening in our areas like Janikhel, like Mumand, like Pakhtunkhwa, or any part of Pakistan. So I think Matiullah Jan Saab is right that we need unity to protest against such draconian laws, because media is controlled, censorship is there. So the only thing left with us to inform our people, to organize, to document is social media platforms, and obviously YouTube and other sites. So I think we should protest. We should call it. It's a draconian law, so we should protest against it. And this is the only thing left for us. If we don't do this right now, I think we will be having nothing left to protest, nothing left to inform the international people believing in human rights, or the media outlets, or the people around us. Thank you.
May?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. I think Pakistan is facing a corona pandemic of dictatorship. People of Pakistan are gasping for air. And we had this digital media as the oxygen supply. And this digital media was the only source from where we could get good information and give voice to our feelings. And this particular government, because it has not come with the support of people, has no interest in the rights of the people. And being the result of political engineering, the government of Prime Minister Imran Khan, he thinks he doesn't owe anything to the people of Pakistan. He doesn't think like a politician who wants to groom his people to speak out and to be brave and courageous to tell the truth. He wants to suppress the people to pave way for God knows what kind of system he has in mind, because he keeps thinking and keeps expressing his desire to turn Pakistan into, sometimes he says Chinese system, sometimes he says Riyasat-e-Medina, sometimes he says Saudi system. He has no idea. He's such a confused politician, if I may call him one, that he thinks it is the media which is maligning him. Otherwise, he's performing very well as a prime minister of the country. So what is happening is that, as Asad Toor has pointed out, the television and newspapers, they have already lost their credibility, and as a result, a lot of revenue. And the social media has gained the credibility. The social media is fast turning into mainstream media in countries like Pakistan. And the mainstream media and newspaper and television channels are getting obsolete. And therefore, for the sake of the business and the credibility, the newspaper and television channels owners, they are compelled to strike a deal with the government. And the deal, it appears, is in the form of this latest law that the government is introducing, of establishing a joint media regulatory authority, which will regulate both newspapers and television and digital media. But I think with newspapers and television already compromised, the biggest problem would be digital media, which is not only a threat to the government, but also to the traditional media investors. So therefore, it seems that the government is desperate to strangulate digital media, and with the increasing influence of the Chinese government here, I think Imran Khan government is secretly working to introduce the kind of social media networking in Pakistan, which is currently in place in the Chinese territories. And this is going to blow, give a severe blow to free speech as well as democracy in Pakistan. And this, I think, is the ultimate dream of the military establishment. They are going to, they are not going to spare digital media, and they are going to come up with a system which no political party seems to be so serious to warn people about.
Thank you.
I also want to just quickly add in while agreeing very with what is being said before, and I think the targeting of Asad was also, and even Mati Saab was also sort of like a lesson, and I do know that there have been threat warnings to other digital platforms after the attack on Asad as well, that because it was just sort of, in addition to other things, was also targeting of somebody who also has his own YouTube subscription-based YouTube channel, and has used that platform to address and do stories which couldn't be done on mainstream press. And yes, in 2017, like I also co-launched one of the platforms with another friend, thinking that the space was shrinking at that time. So we do progressive work over there, and we are increasingly, targeted, and just like banning a website, blocking a website, and disruption in website streaming was not enough. And the Pakistan, PICA and social media rules has not really, I mean, it can target individuals, but not like proper setups and organizations or platforms. So definitely this new regulatory body is going to do the draconian job of censoring the digital spaces as well. And I want to quickly just add, which I couldn't before, is that in terms of targeting of journalists and defenders on social media, through social media, which yes is the only space which is currently what we have for an activist and journalists have for talking about some critical issues which don't get talked about in other spaces. But the role of these companies like Twitter, Facebook, YouTube is also really at times complicit, because while having certain policies for protections and policies for civic space and against hate and security policies which they are supposed to follow, because all of us are their consumers, and we are they're using us for business. They have those policies, but when it comes to global south and to countries like Pakistan, they are not implemented. For instance, when activists and journalists are targeted and in like some really scary, dangerous campaigns, smear campaigns online, these social media companies do not always do the due diligence and do not like suspend accounts, do not block that content which is harmful, because they don't understand the political context of our countries and in the language in which people are targeted. And I'm only bringing this up because we are talking from an international platform. And that's and these big multi-million dollar social media platforms and companies owe it to us, because we are also, there are millions of subscribers in our countries which who use these platforms, but our speech and the protection of our speech is partially also their job. I know we are talking about repression in our countries, but when they don't do that, when they don't follow those proper security protection policies that they're supposed to, they are complicit in our repression. And for instance, the latest attacks against Asma Shirazi, which couldn't complete before, the Twitter did not suspend those accounts. And or sometimes it takes some time to remove those trend panels from hashtags from the trend panels. So so they also need to do their due diligence.
Thank you, Rabia. We are running a fair bit over, but this has been just an absolutely fascinating conversation. Thank you so much to our panelists. I'd like to just do a short concluding round. Putting together some questions from Aisha Ejaz Khan and from Yasser Qureshi, which I think is a nice way to conclude. What is it that you feel now going forward that civil society organizations, the Bar Association, international activists, movements, struggles can do? And especially since this panel has been organized, between Salman, Zoha, Aisha, and myself, what can academics and activists abroad do to support you in Pakistan? I'd like to ask Sanna ji to perhaps begin.
It is very clear for the people. I think that we are supporting a non-violent movement. For the past 3.5 years, we are doing things which in the long run will support the development of the country or make it a good state. I hope so. So we are trying for that. We are not someone who are doing something like the security agency. They call us separatist, or they call us anti-state or anti anything. It's very easy for them to target us. It's very easy for them to kill us. But the only thing is, what we want from all the academics or the people living outside the country to document these things, to talk to us, because we are facing everything like social isolation, from social isolation to losing jobs and anything, and even sometimes mental health issues. So what I think is, the people who have the capacity to write, they can write about these things. They can document about these things. Like Rabia is here. I'm thankful to her because I mostly refer human rights violation cases to her when she was working with Amnesty. And there are many people out there. So sometimes they don't take it seriously. I think those people who are living abroad, they should take it seriously. They should respond to us quickly. They should document these things. They can write about these things. They should write papers. They should present these things, and they should arrange talks like you arranged today. So these are the things which make us, or which give us platforms to speak. We are not allowed to speak anywhere else. We are not allowed to take our points or demands to somewhere. And we don't have approach sometimes to the people outside or the human rights organizations. So wherever they are, wherever the people are working, they can do things according to their capacity to support us, to support democracy, civilian supremacy, the non-violence movement, and the dissidents, and the things which are related to the human rights, not related to some specific nations or things like that, but they can support human rights. They can support free media. They can support freedom of speech. They can support human rights violations. Sorry. So they can support us against the human rights violation. So these are the things they can do, and I think this is the most important thing for us to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Sannaji. Asad, why don't you go ahead?
Well, I would also like to request that the people like you and others who are sitting in influential capitals that kindly raise voice for us, report whatever is happening, document it, and keep raising voice, not for just individuals like me, Sanna, or Matiullah Jan, or Rabia, Mahmood, Saiba, but overall for the media, for the journalist community, for activists, for political activists. Raise voice for them. Ask wherever you are residing, the leadership to influence Pakistani leadership to stop these policies. Digest dissent. There is no harm in dissent. We are not harmful for this country. We're just doing our job. We are reporting. We are demanding the rights of our people. We are criticizing the unlawful policies, the unconstitutional steps. This is our job. And we report this for the betterment of this country, for the betterment of our people. So please understand it. Ask the influential capitals to at least talk to our leadership. Let's stop it and just raise voice. This is what I want to request.
Thank you, Asadji. Rabia, why don't
you?
Oh, sorry, Mahmood, go.
Yes, I think the universities like London School of Economics should focus on democracies, so-called democracies like Pakistan, and should particularly focus on the state of repression, as you describe it, and who is responsible for it. I mean, this digital media now, as I said, is the only source of ventilation for us. It comes as a ventilator for Pakistani society. How much influence the military establishment has on digital media, I think this is something which needs to be researched in depth. And then on the basis of that research, such social media companies and forums should be recommended that what can they do to protect democracy from such kind of undemocratic influences and interventions in various countries. This is one. Secondly, when it comes to bars, Pakistani lawyers, they are very vibrant. They continue to hold the flag of democracy. The lawyers' bodies too have been infiltrated very heavily by the establishments and undemocratic forces. In fact, the judiciary has been infiltrated in Pakistan by undemocratic forces. And this is actually destroying these institutions from within. And yet we have Pakistan Bar Council, we have Supreme Court Bar Association, the famous association which led the lawyers movement back in 2007, then Iftikhar Mohammad Chaudhry was removed by General Musharraf. But later he was restored because of the Supreme Court Bar Association. So with these bar associations and lawyers body, we still have some hope. And I would recommend that these bar associations and media bodies should be jointly helped by international bar associations and international media bodies. So while we do have the Journalist Defense Committee constituted by Pakistan Bar Council, I think Journalist Defense Committee should be replicated at the international level by the international lawyers bodies. And they should, while being outside Pakistan, extend their help and assistance to Journalist Defense Committee in Pakistan and journalist bodies in Pakistan. Because with digital media, I think we at least do have now an opportunity to legally prosecute people in Pakistan from outside as well, who are targeting democratic forces and pro-democracy journalists in countries like Pakistan. So I think this kind of collaboration needs to be extended and expanded at the international level as well. But I would again suggest that the universities like LSE should particularly create a research-based foundation for such kind of collaboration.
Thank you, Mati-san. Many things to think about. Rabia, you have the last word.
I would just, agreeing with everything which has been said before, would just say more international solidarity amongst targeted groups and activists and bodies of journalists. More and more solidarities, more kind of like in regional base, like South Asian, Asia Pacific, and also international otherwise. Because I see a lot of things in common as people who are targeted by their repressive regimes. Sort of mostly the way regimes target us is similar, and also for academics and activists and others in influential capitals, like Asad said, holding your own governments accountable and like organizations accountable in your own countries, for instance, governments and organizations that are selling surveillance technologies to our to Pakistan government and authorities. So looking at business and human rights models and seeing if these companies are sticking to those, if they are responsible or enabling human rights violations in our countries. So just holding your own governments accountable in their role, you know, for their role in repression in our countries. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Thank you. This has been a rich conversation, and we hope to continue them and take many of your suggestions forward and think further. Thank you to everybody who attended, and both apologies for running over, but I think it was also really wonderful to run over. So thank you, and have a good rest of your afternoon. Best of luck and keep safe, everybody.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Bye.